Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Ukraine House Davos. We're thrilled to have you here. It's a full house. And we're looking forward to diving right in with our first panel of the day. Ukraine and the EU, strength through economic partnership. We look forward to hearing about the current synergies and successes and the exciting opportunities on the horizon. The sponsor of today's panel is the CEO Club, and we, on behalf of the Ukraine House Organizing Committee, we would like to express our sincere gratitude to you for making this panel happen and for contributing to this house and this week. We really value your important contribution, Serhiy Hadechuk. Thank you very much for being the engine behind this. We're really grateful to you.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce the moderator of our panel today, Mr. Serhiy Hadechuk. He is the founder and president of the CEO Club of Ukraine. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to you for introductions. Thank you, Serhiy.
Thank you very much. Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Ukrainian House in Davos and to our discussion panel. Thank you for coming, and I am so pleased to see a full house here. Now we compete with Trump because he is also has a speech somewhere. So why did we decide to organize this panel? Because we believe that Ukraine, as a young country with its huge opportunities, which are underestimated in the international business discourse. So today we are going to share with you real cases and stories that take place in Ukraine right now. And now I would like to start with introducing our panelists. To my right, Ольга Магалецька, head of the Office of the National Investment Council of Ukraine. Next to her, Mr. Jean-Christophe Lalou, Director General, Head of Operation, European Investment Bank. Next to him, Елена Kosharny, founding partner and CEO, Horizon Capital. Then Yaroslav Prigara, CEO, Sherp. And last but not least, Andrei Gorokhov, Chief Executive Officer, UMG Investment. Since we are limited of time, we divided our panel into three parts. First, we will start by asking a specific question to each of our guests. Then we will discuss collectively some important issues related with investments in Ukrainian economy. And then finally, we will have time for Q&A from your side. So let's begin our panel. And I would like to start our panel with a description of the context of cooperation between Ukraine and the European Union. In today's Ukraine, there are many systemic and profound positive changes that may be not visible from the outside for our partners and friends. This can be judged even on the basis of an association agreement with European Union that we signed 5 years ago, and by which it seems to me we have achieved very positive results. So my first question to Olga. Olga, could you describe the current state of economic collaboration between Ukraine and the EU, considering 5 years of active association agreement? And what are the status and achievements, maybe some specific numbers of this cooperation? What is the dynamic of the trade?
Thank you, Sergey. So the free trade agreement, it came into force since September 2017, and it gave the access to the European market of with like 500 million consumers, and actually it's a huge market and the potential for Ukraine. So basically, taking into account our numbers now, EU is a trading partner #1, and the share is growing, not like the with this slope, let's say, but steadily but growing. And the share of exports to European Union in 2019 is 42%. So it's basically European Union is our largest market where we export. And the amount is about $50 billion of our trade with European Union. And what can I say over here? We definitely have the decline of the export share with CIS countries and Russia. It's definitely like that. And the European Union share is growing. That's good for us, and we are doing everything we can for that.
Okay.
We can discuss it later, but specific.
Okay, thank you very much. So my next question to Mr. Lalou. The bank you represent is a great partner of Ukraine. I know that over the last 5 years you've been invested approximately, I don't know, something like $3 billion. Maybe you can correct me. Could you share with us what are current state of your portfolio in Ukraine? In which industries are your current projects?
Okay. First of all, good morning to everyone. It's a full house. It's quite an impressive setup, and indeed it's my honor to represent today the European Union through one of its institutions, the European Investment Bank. We're the bank of the 27 member states, for those who don't know us. Well, 28, but soon 27 in a couple of days.
They're going there.
We invest in long-term investments, so fixed asset formation. We invest around 60 to 65 billion euros per year, largely long-term loans. And of that, indeed, we invest a majority of what we do inside of the EU, but also outside of the EU. Now, outside of the EU, our two major intervention zones are the eastern neighborhood and the southern neighborhood. In the eastern neighborhood, Ukraine represents 50% of what we do, and we have today a portfolio of around 6 billion euros of committed financing. Mm-hmm. Of that, and this is potentially something we will have to talk about later, there is about roughly 1/3 which is disbursed already. And what we are really working actively on is to try to disburse the money that we have committed, sometimes a number of years ago. And indeed, there are a number of things that should be sped up. Now, of this 6 billion, 2/3 goes to the public sector for public goods, infrastructure, roads, bridges, energy, municipal infrastructure. And 1/3 goes to the private sector, banking sector on the one hand, and individual corporates on the other hand. Now, looking ahead, we are probably going to maintain a rhythm, and what you probably know, and I think it's interesting to note as well, is that seen from the European Union perspective, Ukraine is an absolutely important partner that also has justified additional efforts in the past years. We have doubled our rhythm of investments between 2014 and 2017 when, political tensions were at a high, to signify as well that European Union was there and was very present. What we want to do is, first of all, to continue lending around 500 to 600 million euros a year to public sector, and going forward, as we intend to become more of a climate-friendly bank, we want to establish ourselves as the climate bank. We want to do more investments, accompany more investments in renewable energy and energy efficiency with the public sector. And we want to continue also to invest in municipal infrastructure, particularly in the east of the country, where we have some early successes. The second thing we intend to do is to continue deploying a number of programs for local small and medium-sized enterprises through local banks, through the so-called deep and comprehensive free trade agreement, especially continue to deploy a number of guarantee facilities that lower the threshold and the cost of credit for medium-sized companies. And finally, We want to try to accompany together with other international financial institutions the nascent, hopefully nascent PPP market in the country, and there are a couple of large-scale projects that we would like to help raise off the ground. And I think with that I have summarized the main items. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to address my question to Lena Kosharna. Horizon in an 850 million fund in Ukraine, backing visionary entrepreneurs. Please share with us your perspective on investing in companies pivoting to Europe and globally, and whether this is succeeding.
Thank you, Siddhi. First of all, thank you so much for this panel. You know, I think this is wonderful, and this is so important to talk about the Ukraine and EU relationship. I mean, if you look at that DCFTA, it was a game changer, and it was truly a groundbreaking agreement. And if early on, before the DCFTA came into effect, if early on it was very easy, let's say, for companies just to sell within the CIS market, I think that the fact that the FTA was coming into place, the fact that it exists, really catalyzed this enormous shift and pivot to Europe. If we look at our own experience, you know, we started off managing a $150 million US government fund. We raised 3 private funds. The latest one that we started raising really had that FTA in mind. We focused on export-oriented companies that were competing and succeeding regionally and globally. And that really resonated with our investors. In fact, we were oversubscribed. We raised $200 million and launched the fund last year. And that's really the kind of visionary entrepreneurs. When I listen to these statistics, it's interesting because you have these like high-level statistics, but then when you drill it down, you're talking about companies, individuals, visionary entrepreneurs, people who are sitting there doing business plans and thinking, you know what, I want to enter these markets. I want to sell in Europe. I want to access 70 countries globally. And this is the mindset that you have in Ukraine wherever you go, whether it's the CEO Club members, whether, you know, the portfolio companies that we back. And we see it. We see it in the numbers. You know, I think I saw Michael Puzrakov from Intellius, one of the co-founders, Vitaly Sedler. I mean, over 70% of their revenue is to the EU. That's huge. You know, we look at our baby stroller company, 40% of their revenue is in the EU. Yarich, biscuits, huge driver selling into Poland and with these large chains. With Ajax, I mean, they sell 57% of their revenue goes to 38 European countries. They're selling over 70% to 75 countries. That's huge. That would not be possible without the free trade agreement, without that pivot, and without the raising of quality and investment in production systems, processes, in order to be able to access global markets. One other thing, when people say to me, well, don't you think after a few years, after 5 years, it's all tapped out? It's just beginning. If you look at Ukraine's export potential, we're still per capita 6.4 times less than the CE average. What does that mean? That means we have huge room to grow. So I think it's definitely, for Ukrainian companies, they are succeeding regionally, globally, and FTA has a big part to do with it.
Thank you very much. And now, Yaroslav. Yaroslav, you are a Ukrainian company with a global, I would say, a unique, successful story with interesting name. How would you describe SHERP? What is SHERP?
First of all, good morning to everybody. Thank you for inviting. It's an honor for me to be a speaker on this panel. But honestly speaking, when somebody is asking about describing of SHERP, we always invite for test drive. But taking into account that there are not so many obstacles for SHERP here in Davos, including number of S-classes on streets, we decided just to show video. I think give some information what is SHERP. У меня следующее будет тоже видео.
Nice.
Wow.
In few words, SHARP is solution for transporting people, up to 22 people, solution for transporting equipment, up to 3 tons, and solution for transporting cargo to any sport on this planet. And answering your question, what we are providing the efficiency, increasing of efficiency. And just one example, maybe you saw in the video, United Nations, last year we became the official supplier of United Nations, the first company, official supplier of World Food Program, the biggest humanitarian missions in the world. And the payback period for when they bought first ships was less than 1 month. It means it's not just slight increasing of efficiency, it's revolutionary increasing of efficiency of state organizations and of businesses.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Yaroslav. And Andrei, last but not least.
Always one more video. I'm sorry for that.
It gives us some entertaining, you know.
And Andrei,
That's okay.
No, it's okay. That's my fault. So you get to.
we start with the video, yeah?
Yeah, please.
The place of unbridled opportunity. In the last 5 years, Ukraine has advanced further than anyone could have imagined. Thanks to a combination of comprehensive reform and democratic governance, Ukraine has climbed 28 spots in the World Bank Doing Business ranking since 2014. In 2019, we reined in inflation, while the Ukrainian hryvnia became the world's best performing currency. Ukraine is building trust with international and domestic investors. The scale and variety of recently implemented projects speak for themselves. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been invested in agriculture, infrastructure, green and conventional energy, IT and telecom, pharma and other sectors. Our economy is now growing at 3.5%, and this is just the beginning. Ukraine has a lot more to offer. Projects planned for the near future are just the tip of the iceberg. Ukraine is open and ready to welcome new investors from all over the world to become the most desirable and attractive investment destination. We are already part of this success story. What about you?
Thank you. So I understood you are not going to speak. You just
Please give the possibility to do that.
Some comments.
okay, Andrei. As a company which you manage is a local investor, Ukrainian investor having 100 portfolio invested in Ukraine. Why only Ukraine?
Well, first of all, about this film, a couple of things. I didn't have time to say them before the film, but we have a saying that money speak for themselves and projects speak for Ukraine. So if people invest, and there are a lot of projects still in progress, it means that there are investors believing in it, and possibly they know what they're doing. They are not in charity business. And in terms of why we invest in Ukraine, well, we believe in Ukraine as a country of as a country which provides opportunities and is a good investment destination. We have majority of our team consisting of Ukrainians who were brought in Ukraine, trained in Ukraine, competent in terms of local specifics. We believe that we provide good job for our investors because we focus in a country which we know, and we know how to add value there, and our investors are able to diversify at higher level when they allocate their funds to different teams, geographies, industries. So that's the main reasons, apart from the things which Ukraine could provide in terms of people, skillful, hardworking, in terms of privatization. It's on the way. I believe that time privatization won't be stopped, and our state would fulfill all the promises they gave to society to privatize. Everything they do have unnecessary in their portfolio of state-owned enterprises. There is a low valuation of assets, relatively low, from 3 to 7% multiples for a country, although being emerging market but bordering EU. That's a pretty good deal to make right now, and in order to enjoy good cash on cash later on. That's why we invest in Ukraine.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to talk about another side of the investment, about risks and obstacles we are facing as investors in Ukraine. And I want to address this question to any of you who are ready to answer. What are the key risks and obstacles for an investor in Ukraine, and how to work with them? How are you managing them? Who would like to answer? Because we've seen a lot of positive things. Yeah, Lena.
Look, the risks in Ukraine are similar to any emerging market, where you look at political risk, you look at macro, currency devaluation risk, et cetera. And I think anyone who is investing in an emerging market, they look at mitigating factors, and they do everything possible that they can to mitigate the risk. When people talk to us about political risk, I mean, look, we had a complete political reset in 2019. We have a president who received 73% of the vote and has a clear mandate, not only receiving 73% of the vote, but also absolute majority in parliament. It is Ukraine's chance now or never, right now, in terms of the political. And if you look at it from an investor standpoint, our investors say, well, he's got a mandate for 5 years, he's got the executive branch, the legislative branch. This is when Ukraine needs to do what it needs to do. And investors, by and large, are looking at it from that perspective. From macro and devaluation risk, obviously when you look at your investments and you're investing in export-oriented companies, then you are having a natural hedge against currency and devaluation, right? Currency devaluation and macro risk, because you're investing in cost-competitive platforms that have a portion of the revenues export-oriented, maybe 50-50 or larger, and that obviously offers a natural hedge. So I mean, there are ways to mitigate the risks in Ukraine of emerging markets, just like you would have any other country.
Okay, thank you. Yaroslav, Andrei?
Yeah, you just wanted to.
Well, from our perspective, which is maybe slightly different because we are not that much exposed to the political risk linked to Ukraine on the investments that we do, but I would say that the real danger that looms potentially is a danger of standstill. Because it's true what you're saying in the film, what the film says. There has been a lot of progress made, and we also recognize some of the things that you mentioned. Decentralization, for example, was an important one. Governance has improved quite a lot. But we're not there yet. So land reform, productivity of agriculture with a huge potential has got to improve. Land reform must be part of it. There are a number of painful reforms that the country still requires. And of course, if the government stands still because these reforms are not popular or because of another external shock, whatever it may be, then it might actually cool off the renewed enthusiasm that we are seeing. One of the elements I would also mention, which should not be underestimated, I mean, apart from the classical, there's too much bureaucracy and it takes too long and so on, and that is still true, but it's not unique to Ukraine, is the process of digitalization. It's important as well, also in the public sector, that Ukraine quickly comes to grasp or launches a nationwide program to foster digitalization and also, therefore, improve the speed of turnaround of administrative processes. So I think with that, I've just summarized it from our perspective.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sergey, if I can add, I think that's very good, your point about digitalization, and we have our Deputy Minister of Digital Transformation, Alex Burnikov, stand up. This is really this is huge because Ukraine never had, as we call it, a Ministry of IT, and the fact that you're seeing this kind of people going from the private sector into the public sector in order to digitize everything and have Ukraine in a smartphone is very exciting for the private sector.
Sergey, if I may.
Yep.
Yeah, I do agree with you that we are on the right path, right? We're going in the right direction, but there is homework to do. And we also talked with many participants of this panel and some guys in the audience in terms of competition, because there is competition in any sphere of our life, including capital, and countries also compete for FDI. And in order to get most of it, you've got to be faster and work on more quality level than others. And although Ukraine is really doing good things, but there is a slight decrease in several points in private equity and venture capital attractiveness index. And it's for a reason, because several countries, like Armenia or Serbia. That was a surprise personally for me when I prepared for the panel. I asked my team to show who outsmarted us. And I never expected, Serbia and Armenia. I didn't expect that. And also 3 countries from Africa, like Botswana, Nigeria. I would never imagine that, and Kenya. And Kenya actually made an impressive leap of improving its position, like 30 places they gained within 3 years. So they took best practices, which are well known. Look at Poland, for example, which introduced long time ago reforms and getting a lot of support from European Union, including European Investment Bank and the projects which you do there. And when you combine capital with people, with sustainable approach and a good strategy and vision, you get very impressive results. And I believe in Ukraine, as I've said, and that film shows that many investors believe, but we have to do our homework and we have to go a bit faster in order to win that competition.
Yeah.
Thank you. Olga, you wanted to comment?
I wanted just to add, actually yesterday we were driving from the Zurich airport to Davos together with Yaroslav, and I'm sorry for putting you on spot over here, but anyway, and we were talking about how to open the new plant to produce Sherpas, and actually this is a question how to do it in Ukraine, and what should Ukraine do in order to make Yaroslav open it in Ukraine? What land he needs, what kind of conditions he needs, and it's a question for the country and for the also legislations to be adopted, like something new, what he needs, in order not even to think how to ask Canada or to or US what they can provide for him, but he shouldn't even ask. He should come into Ukraine, find the land, find the place where to open the new plant, and to make Sherpas here. So, if you can imagine.
Ярослав?
Actually, I say nothing about risk, but I would say a few words about strategy and conditions. Because as a Ukrainian citizen, I am very happy that Ukrainian hryvnia becomes stronger and stronger. I'm very happy that development of the economy goes in the right way. But at the same time, when we look also in production index, when we look on the conditions for exporters, I have a lot of questions. And from my point of view, it should be a combination. And it should be strategy behind how we move together, increasing of the wealth of the country, and together with the increasing of or making better conditions for producer who will place those factories, plants in this country.
Thank you very much. I would also ask one small question. What are the common mistakes investors make when they come to Ukraine, and what would you recommend them? Maybe just a small answer.
Yeah, I can start. When we're talking about investors coming, we're talking about FDI, right? And possibly private capital, or possibly also institutional capital coming. But institutional, that's your area of expertise. I'll be talking about private one. So when investors are coming, they also have to do their homework and understand mentality, cultural differences. They have to understand how this market works and how risks are being mitigated. Are there any specific risks which are attributable to that market or not? And for that, there are embassies, there are business associations, there are business clubs, there are other investors from these or other countries who already invested and have experience within a country. So if they do their homework properly, then it's a question how to organize a business in Ukraine. Do they want to go alone? Do they want to co-invest with a local player for some reasons? Will it be a financial investor or other, let's say, strategic or semi-strategic investor, providing some practical knowledge and assistance in terms of local market? So if the homework be done properly, then people start investing, and then they have to consider how they're going to do it. Do they want to invest in Ukrainian entity, or they invest in some place like Netherlands or Cyprus or Liechtenstein or other place, US, for example, having holding company there and having proper legal structure with proper shareholding agreement to protect itself from possible commercial risks and other risks, including political ones, and etc. So you go, you're like a questioner. There are some questions to tackle. You answer them. If you answer them properly, then there is only business risk attributable to industry, and that's similar everywhere worldwide. It exists. Otherwise, people won't be getting rich and wealthy and getting good cash on cash and IRR. If there be no risk, then let's say the risk is attributable to investment.
Thank you, Andrei. It's very competent and detailed answer from successful local investors. Thank you very much. Okay, now we still have 10 minutes to discuss with the speakers. And I would like to talk about the future. Could you share your future investment plans in Ukraine in medium term, for example, next 3-5 years? The volume of potential investment, maybe specific industries in which you want to invest, and why in those industries. And we could start from Lena.
Great. Okay, so far we've invested over 700 million in Ukraine and the near region in 150 companies through 4 funds. And our plans for the next 3 to 5 years, we're almost actually 60 to 70% committed in the new fund that we just launched and closed last year. So things are going very well in that fund. We're already closing our 10th and 11th deals right now. So I expect to be back on the fundraising trail. I've already told my LPs to pencil us in early 2021, end of this year, for our next fund. So our plans together with our co-investors and with Horizon Capital Direct is to do about $1 billion of business in the next 3 to 5 years. So that's our plans. And I think what's important is the equity component. And we were talking a little bit about this, Jean-Christophe. Equity is so important in Ukraine. Equity is so important because it really catalyzes the entire financing package. And, you know, we've seen that, like, when even an amount like 25 million of equity will easily bring in another 25 million of debt, and on top of that, additional leverage factor, et cetera. You know, that component is critical, and that component is really required in Ukraine. We welcome more funds coming to Ukraine. We welcome more equity investors. And I think that's very important for Ukrainian companies to really back them with the equity, not to lever them up completely. That's important. And be able to do those larger projects. There's a $450 million project that, because of 75 million in equity, is going to happen, and that's the IT park with Brookfield in Lviv. And that's really important, that equity component. So by and large, I think you've got a very strong platform in Ukraine. You've got a very strong story. I don't know why anyone from EU wouldn't look at this market. You know, when we look at our investor base, over 60% is European institutions, European family offices, foundations. They're here already through us. Every week, I'm getting phone calls from EU companies who are looking at bolt-on acquisitions in Ukraine. That's very important because they're global players. They're looking for an extension of their platform and buying something in Ukraine. They look at it and say, hold on, this is a country that borders four EU countries. Anywhere from Ukraine, you can get something into a EU capital in 2 days. It makes complete sense. And we see that with Sarantis coming in. We see that with Stada, that everyone was talking about in December, who bought the pharmaceutical business of Biopharma, 2.4 billion German strategic. It makes sense for them. Buy the production platform in Ukraine. They can access not only Ukraine market, but also go regional. So, I mean, we see that bolt-on acquisitions. We see EU investors wanting to play through funds, and we see them wanting to do direct.
Thank you very much. Sounds great. You're going to invest 1 billion in the next 3-5 years. Together with partners.
Together with our co-investors.
Yeah.
Our co-investors, we can do investments. We typically look at investments in the range of 10 to 20 million, but our co-investors give us the ability to look at projects up to 100 million. And then together with debt financing, some of the projects that we're investing in will reach that 1 billion mark. That's our goal.
Cool. Thank you very much. Andrei, what about you?
European Investment Bank, because it's more material than our company.
Okay. So in terms of the European Investment Bank, the next years, I think it's important to note that, and some of you who follow European affairs know, there's going to be a new cycle of 7 years starting in 2021. That comes with new instruments, with new ways of financing, both inside and outside of the EU. And outside of the EU, they're going to have a new denomination for their action, their financial action, for the EU budget's financial action outside, which is called the Neighbourhood Development Instrument, something like that. It's a fairly complicated acronym. What is it going to change? Well, we don't know yet, and it might have indeed also repercussion on Ukraine. What we don't know yet is what amount the European member states are going to agree in terms of external action compared to the funds that they put inside the EU. And you probably all know there is a kind of a difficult debate at the moment within the EU as to how much contribution member states should agree to, given the fact that the UK, which is a net contributor to the budget, is going to leave the EU. We're probably not going to see a decision about that before, I would say, mid to end of this year. And I think the decision will come probably at the German presidency at the end of the year. That's my guess. All of this to say that that in turn might impact the volume of financing that we will do in the future, in particular in terms of public goods. What we see at the moment is probably roughly 500 to 600 million euros of public sector financing, a couple of hundred of millions with private sector financing with a bit more cyclicality in it. We're going to try to continue to do more with the local banks to provide guarantees to SMEs that export to the EU market under the DCFTA facilities. And we're going to try on the spot to do a couple of FDI, accompany a couple of European companies that perform FDIs in Ukraine and want to invest in the country. There's one last thing I would please like to just mention, and you know, some of the remarks made here. You know, when I think about, I don't know what mistakes we make, but I can tell you what difficulties we have.
Okay.
And there is one I would like to mention in particular. It is the need for the country to have a well-functioning public administration. It is very often something which is a bit neglected. You know, when the country becomes wealthier, and we see it in different places, you know, some people, especially in the private sector, become very rich, and that's fine. But there is probably too little investment, at least from our perspective as institutional investors, too little investment in a well-functioning, well-paid public administration. Not that everybody has got to be paid unreasonable amounts, but we see that a lot of other things that we would like to do, and in particular in terms of going from financial commitments to effective disbursements on the ground, with the money deployed on the ground in physical assets, that requires a well-functioning public administration. So I think that, you know, it is important to also have people who embrace that career, who are paid enough, who are not necessarily exiting after a short number of years, and who are there also to accompany institutional investors like us in the long term. And I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lalu. Olga, then after Andrei, we will ask you how you can help, how the government can help our potential investors. Andrei, what is your plan?
Well, at the moment, valuation of our assets is around $500 million US, and within the next 3-5 years, we are planning to invest. Well, here it depends, because we'll see how our country develops and what will be the cost of debt, because I completely agree with everything Olena said, but cost of debt right now is decreasing in local currency, which is also important. Many investors coming with to Ukraine, with which we discuss building some manufacturing facility there. There are a couple of questions. One of them is like tax incentives from the state, and usually a second one is what's the cost of local debt. And what we see right now that within the next 12 months, we are supposed to get to 10-12% in hryvnia, in local currency. That's a target at least. National Bank says that there is a high chance that we'll reach that state, and that definitely will make more projects attractive, and cash-on-cash IRR like more interesting for local and for foreign investors. So I assume we'll invest at least 150 to 200 million US dollars within the next 3-5 years, but possibly more, depends.
Okay, thank you very much. I like this panel so much. So together with Lena, European Investment Bank, and Andrei, we'll have something like $200.2 billion in the next 3-5 years. But now the question to Olga. Olga, based on what you just hear from our colleague, what kind of support can you provide for potential investors as a head of the Office of the National Investment Council of Ukraine? Or what would you recommend them? How could you help?
Okay, let's say like that. Last week, like on Friday, we had a meeting with one of the companies which was in the video which Andrei shows us. I will not mention the name, but anyway, they're going to invest around 200 million in Ukraine and open up a new, let's say, platform or plant. And it was a meeting also with them, and they do have some obstacles also with the regional, let's say, власть of Vlada. So I totally agree with Jean-Christophe on his quotes about the public administration reform. We definitely have to do like everything in order to implement this, and in order to have like right people who can provide the private investors and institutional investors with like all our support in all the levels, not only like the high level dialogue like what we have now, but anyway, it's not about like to provide the commitments, but when you go into the grounds, when you do the project, then you invest, like you see real people on the local level, and this may not happen even. So what we are going to do? We are meeting the president. We are meeting the valuable members of the parliament, and we are trying to provide like high-level support in order to make that happen for the project. And honestly speaking, we are going to the local guys and say like, look, guys, you have to do that. You have to do that for the region, and it is still like that, to be honest.
You know, this is such an important topic because when we look at Ukraine, the nominal GDP, which was about 180 billion in 2008 and shrunk to 91 after 2014-15, and now is about 135 billion. We aren't even at 2008 levels. So when we see what the government has announced, a $50 billion effort to attract 50 billion in FDI in 4 years by 2024, you can only do that through large-scale investments in infrastructure. That's the only way. You know, all the VC investings backing visionary entrepreneurs making $20, $40 million, that's going to move the dial for individual companies. But for the country, there has to be a way to unblock what you've said. $6 billion in commitments and about $2 billion has been dispersed. There has to be a way to unblock. And actually, when you drill it down, it was interesting because in Mariupol, we all were together at the end of October, and looking at Mariupol, you know, the water treatment facility, and that was a project that was brought together very quickly. And I heard from the mayor that he was saying that, you know, and EIB officials and others were saying this was one of the fastest projects that really was put together. I think we really need at that local level, at the municipal level, you know, there have to be teams within the cities that are able, have the knowledge to pull together these financing packages and work to do that. Because all over the country, you need water treatment facilities, sewage facilities, you need everything in terms of infrastructure. And the only partners that EIB and others have include the municipal level. Is that right, Jean-Christophe? Where do you need, who are the deal makers for your, if you want to do a sewage treatment, you know, water treatment, all these recycling plants, everything we need, who's the missing partner for you?
I mean, if you ask me directly, the missing partner is the coordination between the various levels of governance. Because for someone like us who does not go into one spot, one individual waste treatment facility, unless it is very big, of course, but we are going to have to bundle a multitude of them. We need the planning capability. First of all, we need the vision at the top of the government that actually gets along to plan and prioritize the local investments, and then the capability to execute them from top to bottom, which means including obtaining the permits, arbitrating between the various priorities of the various parts of government, both local and central. If the two do not collaborate well together in terms of priority setting and execution, then you incur terrible delays like the ones we've had.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. We still have 8 minutes for Q&A, so please raise your hand and our assistants will give you a microphone. And please introduce yourself and tell who exactly you're addressing the question. So, is there any questions? Yeah. Where is our microphone? Somewhere. Oleg. Can you do this without
Yeah, I
mic?
will do it without mic.
Okay.
With your booming voice.
Pretty convenient, yeah. So, Oleg Volnov, Cisco System is an American company. My question is about the Ukraine role. 10 years ago, it was massively discussed Ukraine as a bridge between European Union and Asia, like Caspian region and Central Asia. Do you see this role today? Is it valuable for you to have Ukraine like mediation? Was this part of the move? John Christopher, probably start with you, but please add everybody from panel. Thanks.
Frankly, from our perspective, we don't see Ukraine first through that lens. I mean, I recognize what you're saying, and indeed, the geographical position of Ukraine is incredibly important for the EU as a buffer, as it were, between the EU and the rest of its neighbors, including the Caspian. But for us, Ukraine is really first and foremost I would say nearly part of the family in terms of trading. We see it as a standalone, very large trading partner with a lot of potential for investments and actually as a natural extension for European companies. So we don't see it as a hub actually, or as a hub to actually necessarily go further on the east, but we see it rather as actually part of the internal bloc, as it were, part of the circle. That's how I would summarize it, but maybe others with other interests would see it differently.
Come to the session at 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to be talking about.
Right, but possibly at that session you would tell us about China, right, and their interest in EU and transportation
I'm not
of.
letting out any secrets. Come
Good. We'll come. But this morning I started from reading James' news. Yeah, he's over there. And there were a couple of articles about China and signing agreements with Укрзалізниця, our rail transportation company, state rail transportation company. And the main reason is to transport Chinese goods from there to Europe through Ukraine. And that's part of an answer. So one way or another, there is logic in connecting these two regions, and Ukraine has a very good geopolitical position, and we are happy to assist, in particular if our country will earn out of that. So, yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Jim.
Thanks for the promotion. Jim Cook, Business News. Today I have a different article in the Atlantic Council blog, which won't win me too many popularity points, but I'm saying that if there is an economic détente with Russia, if the war moves into a frozen conflict phase, how will that affect the foreign investor view of Russia? We all know our friends outside of the country basically think Ukraine equals war. Unfortunately, that's the reality of many corporate boards. I'm wondering if we have this conversation a year from now, and if there's been a slowdown in the war, some sort of frozen, imperfect, and perfect is often the enemy of the good, situation, a frozen conflict, how will that affect Len and the people you deal with in Toronto and elsewhere?
Definitely, there's categories of investors who look at Ukraine and say, until there's a peg in the conflict with Russia, we're going to wait and see. And I don't think those investors are looking at, frozen conflict, this scenario, that scenario, that scenario. I mean, there's a lot of different scenarios and a million opinions. But from their standpoint, they're looking for one thing, the peg in the conflict. So those investors will wait. And the investors who are coming in and who are entering, obviously they're entering in more attractive terms than the investors who wait. So those who wait and see, they are going to be subject to higher valuations, higher prices for assets, for investments, et cetera. And, we think, one of our investors, they're one of the most savvy, a very large U.S. Brand name investor. And they said to us, Ukraine is the most exciting play, the most exciting value play in the globe today. And when you look at record high valuations, record liquidity, private equity, it's record liquidity, the funds that are raising, they've raised record amounts. They got to put that money to work. And putting it to work at a 20x EV/EBITDA, or if you look at Ukraine, 5 to 6x EV/EBITDA, that's a big difference. You know, even if you look at public companies who are starting to say, before they were thinking, well, we're not sure we want to put a line in our public financial statements that we're in Ukraine. Now they sit there and go, okay, I'm trading at 20x and I can buy at 7 to 8. Boom, you put the revenue in, and right away that revenue is at 20x, increases the value of the companies. So by and large, for many investors, this is already old news for the last 5 years. And now they're starting to see really the benefits far outweigh that concern. And for others, they'll just stay out. The ones who, for them, it's a peg and that's it.
Well, and there are some investors in between, for example, who think that they mitigate risk by placing their facilities in western part of
That's
Ukraine.
right.
It's much easier to exit from, let's say, those businesses. But again, it depends on people who either manage or own capital. They're responsible for it, and we talk to them. We show them, perspectives and attractiveness of investment projects, and they decide whether they're eager to take risks or not, and whether there is some sort of mitigation, for example, going with OPEC together, or not, or with EBRD or IFC or with Horizon Capital, let's say, considering ULPs.
I mean, don't forget about IT. It's export of services. That's gone from 110 million industry in 2003 to 4.6 billion. And that has huge knock-on effects. All the IT entrepreneurs who, they're investing in real estate, they're investing in development, there's IT facilities. You know, almost every single developer in the country now has their office buildings full of IT companies. That's exciting. And that doesn't depend on if there's a peg in the conflict.
Thank you. And last question, Denis.
Denis Dolinsky, businessman. Lena, you said about faster. I want to know what you mean, because businessman and investor very faster in Ukraine. Very fast.
Yeah.
In Ukraine. But we have some problem with government.
Yeah.
Maybe you mean government. They are a little slowly, I think. Yeah? Thank you.
I'm not sure that we have any problems here.
It was a question. Or?
That was a question.
What do you mean? We must be more faster.
No, look, obviously the private sector is fast. The private sector is reacting to events, circumstances, real time. And that's the same in any country in the world, right? Anywhere you go. And frankly, like, I'm Canadian. And my Canadian friends or my North American friends and business people, they don't even know who the ministers are. They don't know their names. They don't know who their local, officials are. I mean, they're focused on business and that's it. And they expect a certain environment and a certain climate. The thing is that in Ukraine, we're in a period of transformation. We've seen more transformation in the last 5 years than for the 20 plus years before that.
Yep.
Okay, that does put pressure on the business community. Because during this period of transformation, you have to react almost daily. Like right now, we talk about turbo regime, all these new laws, all these new regulations, everything coming in place, and business people have to react real time, and that's just a fact of life. That's what we have to do. If we want to see this country change, we want this transformation to occur, and at the end of it, I hope that we will be sitting in a country where we don't even discuss what's changing, what isn't changing, because the rules are in place, it's stable and predictable, and we can plan for the next 5-10 years.
Thank you very much. It's time to finalize our panel. I think it was an interesting and informative panel with very optimistic and encouraging promises to invest in Ukrainian economy.
And homework to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Ukraine is a really young country in which everything is just beginning. So I invite future partners to join us and together create successful and great stories. Thank you very much.